May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee DeBoer?
Here.
Trustee Stretchell?
Here.
Trustee Pfeiffer? President Vanderstel?
Here.
Trustee Walschlager?
Here.
Trustee Connor?
Here.
Trustee Buckles?
Here.
If you'd all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, Trustee Pfeiffer is not here, so we'll do it all together.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have an item on the agenda that is for a special events permit for Palmer's tent event. If we could pull that forward, it would be appreciated for their sake. They do have some things that they have to do. If anybody, it would take a suspension of the rules and then also a motion to pull that item up.
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules and move that up to number 1.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to move the special event permit request for the tent event up to the first item in the meeting. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion is carried. So that item is now number 1. So we will take the discussion and consideration of an application. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we get to that, public comments for anybody that would like to come towards this podium and speak. And do we have anybody on Zoom? Nobody on Zoom. Anybody in the room that would like to speak in public comments? Seeing as there are none, we will move to our first item. As the motion initiated, we will have discussion and consideration of an application for a special events permit for Palmer's Tent Event Gala. This will be at 122 East Capitol Drive, September 17th, 2023. They are present. Jerry and Maria Reynes were asked to be here, as is customary with other permit requests. In case anybody on the board had questions, the village has been notified that there will really be no changes other than this is 2023 and last year was 2022. Does the board have any questions for the presenter or want to request that they come to the podium? Or someone can make a motion, whatever the board decides.
I'll make a motion to approve the special events permit for Palmer's Tent Gala on 9/17/2023.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the tent event gala for September 17th, 2023. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Jerry and Marie.
And good luck on beating last year's number.
Enjoy the water.
We now have a presentation of our building study.
I'm actually not going to do the PowerPoint, if that's okay. I have the slides in the packet, so I'll go through that.
Oh, thank you.
So I just ask that you ask them at the time that you have it. I've allocated 30 minutes. If that's too long, please let me know. There's a lot to digest here. And whatever we need to do to get clarification for you in the ensuing days and weeks as you think about this project and what that might do for you, we'll be happy to come back and answer any further questions you have. So again, if you could flip up the agenda, again, 30 minutes, we're going to talk about the existing building that you have. We're going to talk a little bit about the program, which is the size of the building that we forecast, talk about the budget. So first one, statement of purpose is to develop and assess the police department, fire department, village hall facilities for long-term space need. Space need is generally determined by the amount of equipment, the number of people that you have in the current condition as well as future growth. And then we looked at what do you do to this building to renovate it compared to a new. So you get to compare what that existing car does compared to a new car and make a determination as to whether there's value in either. So existing building qualities. I like to think about the building as the human body. So The skin of the building, the windows, the cladding, and the roofing represents the skin of a human body. We've got nervous system and an array of systems that support the function in this space. Could be illumination, could be HVAC, could be plumbing. All those systems are taken into account when we consider what we can do with this present facility. Just point of reference, the fire department is an existing building that you currently have on Lawn Street, has 3 drive-through bays, represents about 9,000 square feet of usable space, and it's what we would term a split bay design, meaning the bays are in the center and then there are support spaces on either side. In this case, a mix of maybe apparatus support and officing on the north, and then for portions of the south, additional repetition. There's actually some living represented by the day room and some other things on the north. So it's a little cross-pollinated, but think about it in those terms. The Village Hall is about 22,900, so say 23,000. The PD occupies about 7,300 square feet of the present building, and it is what we would term a multi-story building. You can come in and get access to lobby space off of Cottonwood. The split level drives it down about 5 feet to the surface lot that is the majority of your parking and is accessed off that surface lot. There's a sub-level, there's a mezzanine level, all told about 5 levels of building, and it represents about 23,000 square feet of space. So I like to quote Gene Kranz from Apollo 13 is, what do you got that's good on the spacecraft? In this building, what do we have that we can use and reuse and adapt and make current present facility that's state-of-the-art and satisfies all those requirements? We took our engineers through and did a walkthrough. We got anecdotal information from staff and we did our own observations. And so the high-level conclusion of the Village Hall is that it's a building that is showing signs of age. So if we think about this as sort of almost like the Consumer Reports, green is good, red not so hot. Roofing is in need of replacement. It's coming up on its end of useful life in many conditions, and you have a multitude of different roofing types in addition here. Windows are okay, but you get condensation on them. It's an indication that glass is leaking or we've got seal problems on that in that location. Cladding, stucco's okay. It just depends on what you want in terms of the aesthetic of the building. Stucco can be repaired. We assumed we'd replace that stucco as we did the cost estimate. Insulation, the building of this age, you're going to see that insulation has compressed over time, so the bad insulation that occupies that wall cavity is separated from the top components. You get a lot of leakage around the building as a result. And then all the systems are absent this room, because this room has been recently updated, sort of vintage or at the point where we could replace those more effective systems. And depending on the magnitude of the remodeling, you'd probably look at doing those major updates at that time. We think about the fire department building, it's in substantially better condition. It's a masonry building. The masonry is in reasonable shape and reusable shape. Again, but the systems are getting up in that 20-year lifespan, and the engineers are going to tell you that when they look at that little table, it's getting to the point where those systems are sunsetting. It will require more maintenance. If you were to do a major remodeling, we'd be looking at updating those systems at the same time. So let's talk a little bit about program. So architectural program, we first identify what you have. So the existing building drawings, the size of those spaces and who occupies those spaces informs what we then infuse as far as our best practices to get you from point A to point B. We have to identify who's in there and what they do in those spaces and who they're communicating with. Presumably, there are more effective associations we can make if we were to redesign the building to make the workflow better and make people more productive. The approach then is to figure out if somebody needs to be near someone else. We always ask why you use it in the manner that you do. There are some things that you've done as a human being occupying a building. We've all seen this. You will accommodate yourself to the nature of what you have. And so human beings are great at adapting. Is there something you do that's really great? Then we would want to reinforce that. If there's something you could do that we could design a building around that we can make you better, then we would want to ignore the thing that you're doing bad and make you in a better place. So the idea is throw away the bad things, reinforce the good things, and come up with a program. That whole program is in Appendix A of the report, and for the final report, that'll be bound in at a larger scale. I just want to give you something that was really difficult to manage. There's a section in what we do that is what I would term lather, rinse, and repeat. So the fire department and police department both had multiple program iterations. Village Hall actually was pretty stable. There wasn't a ton of movement within that. They're not looking for an abundance of space. Police and fire are looking for space. So the village hall was pretty stable, but police and fire, we had a number of iterations. And I think at the core of this is what you have to ask yourself, is there some benefit in combining? So currently you have a multiple occupant building here, which is police and village hall, and then you've got fire off-site. Is there some benefit in taking something away from here and putting it somewhere else where you'd have 3 sites? Are you better off having 3 buildings on one site? I should add that one of the concerns with that is the eggs in one basket theory, which is if you take and you transport everything into a single place, are you vulnerable because you have now combined all facilities into one location? In some ways, with the size of the community, you're probably affected no matter what would happen, whether it's disastrous, man-made, or other. But you are more vulnerable if you're on one site than if you're on more than one. So again, summation of the village hall, really not looking for additional program space. I've added in some universally accessible toilet facilities or gender-neutral facilities, but generally speaking, there were not an abundance of requests for space that was highly excessive compared to what you have. Police is looking for more space. That won't be probably may not be a surprise to anyone, but they're looking for space, and it's a measurably larger requirement. So the things that I think drive that out of everything, aside from building in future growth, maybe an additional investigator, things like that, this program identifies all the vehicles enclosed in one parking garage. That's the biggest number that you're going to see as a deviation. Training, which you really don't have, is incorporated into the program. Evidence and custody are both processing related things. So evidence, we have more magnitude of evidence to be stored, or we have rooms that I want to give people a better environment so they're less vulnerable to work in those spaces. In terms of custody, it's ensuring that I've got male, female, juvenile separation. I've got a safe environment that I can take and process an individual before they get booked at the county. And then building is a major component. So systems occupy space in buildings, which you're familiar with. The mezzanine above the police department has HVAC equipment. You've got other systems that are housed within the building itself. And putting all those contemporary systems into a building uses more space than you'd be accustomed to having. The equipment's bigger, the maintenance requirements are bigger, and so building actually constitutes a fairly large, or a larger combined number than it was previously. In terms of fire, they are also looking for more space, but it's not really apparatus space. There is some additional apparatus that we're administering to, but it's not in a drive-through bay given the location that we'll talk about on the site. What we are looking for is administrative space, the ability to have full-time firefighting capabilities or sleepover capabilities in a more profound manner, and doing so in a building that would be larger as a result. So let's look at the site fits. You're familiar with your existing site. We go to that one. So this is when I'm referring to Village Hall, I'm referring to this site, Village Hall and PD. Cottonwood on the west, this is a north-oriented view. You've got parking to the east between the river and this building. Again, you've got a walk-off condition, so I can get into the building off the parking at one level, and I can get into the building off of Cottonwood at another level. And a multi-story building, I think there are actually 5 levels. So one of the things we have here is we have a competitive parking condition. So we've got a number of different clients, not only the people in this building, but also the library, that need to have a sort of a copacetic responsibility to one another in terms of parking. Lawn Street, or the fire department site, north now is to the left. I did that to keep the drawings that we have created in the same orientation for you. They're also looking for more space. Restriction here is they've got Lawn Street that forms the arc of the building on the west. The existing park and river is to the north here. There is drive-through capability through the site back out to the east, and a large parking area that's to the south between the residential property and your property. And then the last site is what we term the Cottonwood site. It's about 4 1/3 acres of land that you currently own. Surrounded by wetlands. This area is a buildable area, and it fits all the components on it. So if you wanted to have combined services in one location, this would be the place that most aptly fulfills that requirement. So let's look at the Village Hall options. I think I might have missed a couple. I think we looked at 9 iterations for building modifications and how things might fit on this site. Some were pretty radical. One was a freestanding building out in the parking lot. We deemed the site that we're presenting today, or the site option C, is the most appropriate given what we know about the project. And so that's the one we focused on. But there were several iterations. And I have to state as party to this, for the size of agency you have, you'd be best served for a police agency on one level. So we are going to struggle to achieve that here. You'll see other iteration on the Cottonwood site where we can achieve that. But for the size of agency that you have, you'll be most effective on one level. And there were a number of different additions, 2-story, 3-story, 5-story. So let's go to option C, what I'm terming the parking lot level. This keeps Park and Rec in this present facility and surrounds it with garage space between the present parking lot and the Park and Rec area. We'd be building out toward the parking lot. We are preserving access to the garage space and the sally port that you presently have. We looked at iterations that would demolish that, but given it's a fairly recent addition, I think that would probably be challenged a little bit. This preserved that in place. It keeps the building entrances accustomed to what you're having. You'd still have a parking lot entrance as well as a Cottonwood entrance. And the majority of the heavy remodeling lies to the south of this. So the first floor on option C, what we're terming the Cottonwood level, we'd remodel the present facility that the police department occupies, and the area where we're building garage, we're gonna build more police department. So we're building out on another level, further out toward the parking lot level. Yes?
Visually speaking, you're talking about building out right behind you.
Correct.
Okay.
As far as we can go to get it through the zoning ordinance and prudent planning for a facility like this, we need every square foot of real estate we have here because of the nature of this site. It's a tight site. We would make it so that we are building as much space as we can. An upper level would constitute some additional space. In this case, we're saying it's operations and investigations. And it's important to note, the final design would be modified. This is a does it fit kind of condition. It's not a final solution to the problem, but it does identify that to fit the program in, we're gonna need an additional level of space. And then you're gonna see on the last page, we still have to go up further to accommodate interior air handlers or rooftop equipment plus some other things. So we end up with a 4-level police department solution, which is not ideal, but it identifies that your site's not done. Having said that, once you've done this, you're done. Like, there's nowhere to go unless you build a parking structure or something else. The site will have been fully developed based on the parameters that we have, which is no adjacent property contiguous to the building on land that you own. But it's a viable option, just not probably the option I would select if I had no limitations, right? But this is a real workable solution. So let's go to the Cottonwood site. This is just to test how the componentry would fit. And I think I've stated before in some of the planning meetings, I think if we were to have fire out here, I'd probably prefer the fire department maybe closer located to Cottonwood because of the truckloads. I'd like to preserve those as far to the east as I could. But this just identified would a building fit, and indeed it does. And again, it's not a final solution at all. It would identify that we have public parking and staff parking. I'd like to segregate those if I could. We have an abundance of vehicular circulation attached to the site that awaits a fire department solution. If we were committed to not doing fire, then I'd probably limit the amount of circulation we're representing here because I don't feel as that it's as necessary. This identifies a fire department further west, and I would need that. This also identifies a village hall further to the east. The village hall could go somewhere else. This could be more of a U-shaped building than an L-shaped building. And I think the important thing to note is that it all fits. So if you said, hey, this is the place we want to be, can these two things fit out there? Yes, they would. You could even go to a 2-story solution, but I'd probably try to put the village hall up on top of police. I don't think I'd want to go to a multi-story police if I didn't have to. So it's a good, viable site. And we can get in a lot of parking. We can probably get in some more parking. I think your existing lot has 53 spaces. This has 99. So it doesn't have to say that you have to build all 99. You could build a fraction of that if you wanted to. But again, this is a test of the site accommodation. Let's look at the Lawn Street Fire Department site. So to fit their program, we're proposing that you'd add to the building to the south. Again, the apparatus bays are preserved as drive-through bays. We're building a smaller garage to the south and east, that would accommodate a lot of this, what I would term the smalls that the fire department currently has. So we're gonna clean out the apparatus bays, make them more serviceable for the really large equipment, and then we'll have that smaller garage to accommodate that. In this case, the location next to the Bark River is all all support space. I want to say administrative support. It's for your SCBA and your maintaining. Everything that you're putting on a vehicle is basically housed in that strip of building. And then everything within the existing building in the addition is largely firefighter, office, living environment, and things that are independent of the apparatus operations. So it helps me control PFAS and contamination by having those things separated. This would accommodate that. Gets pretty tight near the Survival Live House. We'd have to do some grading and some things to make that work. And you'd relinquish your ability in the parking lot to get through to the east. And I think that's an important note, although we can still flush vehicles to the east and the west and return in the current status that you have. In addition, because we're consuming parking lot, we'd probably have to look to try to put dedicated firefighter parking on Lawn Street. It's currently not posted for parking. We'd probably have to accommodate parking in some manner there, because I've consumed the lion's share of your parking as part of the building. Okay, so let's look at budget. We worked with Selzer Ornst to do a forecast of the construction values.
Could I
Yes.
ask you a question?
Yes.
Could you go back to that last slide?
Sure.
So, is there any way to add parking? You can't go anywhere to the north of the current building, right? You could not put any parking to the north side?
Yeah, I'd have to check. It's possible. I mean, it's park and you're near the Bark River. So it could be potentially, let's just say we had no limitations. We could probably park along that edge. It would be prone to unsuitable soil as well as it might flood. But if that were a possibility and we could go into that park area, that would represent additional parking. Now, it's not like you're losing all your parking, I have to add, right? So we can get parking in that strip between your present south lot line and where the building is. It's not, we haven't consumed it all, but we will limit the amount of cars you can get by half in there. So there does need to be some supplemental, and I think that can be achieved in a couple ways. It could include something on near the Bark River.
And even to the east of that location, right along the entrance where you see trees
Correct.
there, would there be some space for parking there?
Yes.
It's not as in jeopardy of being as close to the river then?
You're
still not far away.
I'd have to look at it. You're dealing with an elevation change. We're coming up in grade a little bit. You'd probably find that there's some availability there. My view is if it's just parking and you can make an accommodation on Lawn Street, let's just say we said we're gonna park along that strip. That's just gonna be policy. That's what we're gonna achieve. So long as you have an end game that satisfies in case in the spring that gets wet or inundated, I think that's a viable solution. The problem that I see with it, though, is it's never as little as it seems, right? I need that full width that's indicated there between where the cars are perpendicularly parked. I've got to circulate in that zone. So it becomes thicker than one might imagine to get that to work. So anytime I can do that with an existing driveway or something like that, imagine if we were parking on, let's say, on both sides of the apron. Whether the chief wants that or not, that apron avails me additional width that I can use for circulation, and that helps to make that parking area smaller.
Thank you.
All right, so go back to budget. So this is a project budget. Project budgets consist of two primary factors. There's construction costs and then everything else. Everything else is generally termed in the industry soft cost. It's furniture, contingencies, builder's risk insurance, everything else that doesn't entail a brick, a mortar, or a hammer with a laborer attached to it is all in the soft cost. And that full budget is in Appendix E. And what you're gonna see there is the construction cost estimate from Selzer Ornst, everything that they use as a qualifier, or to say, here's what we priced. And then I think it's 9 sheets of other project costs, some of which apply to you, some of which don't, that you should just be aware of, because they fulfill the requirements of having a thorough budget. And my view on budgets is they need to be transparent. Absent transparency, you can't determine what you would do about a budget. So we give you a lot of information because as the individuals responsible to create the budget, if you don't know what's in it, you can't make a decision. And so while that's a lot of information, we're happy to talk to you about anything that's in that budget and how we went about doing it. But we don't want to leave you with a project where you go, what do you mean it's more? I didn't put furniture in there, what were you thinking? This identifies all the topics so that you can manage your process moving forward. So I'm just using here this locker as an example of why budgeting matters. And so when I say lockers to anyone who's establishing cost of a project, they might be thinking about a school locker. Okay, a school locker has a price point. A duty locker or a piece of gear grid, and it doesn't even have to be a locker, it could be gear grid for firefighter use, isn't the same as that. And so we talk about these things in this project so that we understand that we're talking about the same style of product, and the difference between 30 lockers can be profound, as you can see. And so I don't want there to be a thing where the chief is thinking a duty locker, but the estimator's thinking a scholastic locker. You should also be thinking about these topics. They're high-level topics, but when we're done, we want to have something that's succeedable or replaceable. One of the problems we have with the current building is the air handling equipment that's up in the attic is exceptionally difficult to replace. I can cut the equipment up and take it out, but it's really hard to get anything in. And whatever you do as a solution should forecast what it is to replace that equipment so you don't have a building that's obsolete after we're complete.
Just so you guys are aware, we had to have a crane brought in to put the air conditioner on the unit. So that's part of the cost he's talking about.
And with buildings like this, we should be talking about redundancy and survivability and the ability for something to happen in the proximity of the building that's even a benign thing like a water main break, which isn't of itself a thing to cause undue harm. But if it takes your building offline, it's a big deal. So we should always be thinking about that. How much redundancy do I have in the system? Do I have full backup for this system in terms of emergency power and the like? And survivability. So we all live in an environment where we experience events. It can be snow events, it can be rain events. But our budget always takes into account that we want something that is survivable and will resist the effects of Mother Nature as long as possible, because on the next sheet, Mother Nature is indeed relentless. And as soon as whatever we do is built, Mother Nature wants to affect it, tear it down, degrade it. And when you make major investments, we don't want to have a project that is not adaptable to the future or will fall down and become a problem 5 years down the road. And I think as we're all familiar, the needs of people that serve in buildings like this have changed. There are an array of different human behaviors now that are unpredictable. We want to afford the people who will work in this building a safe environment as well. So budget, the one that will probably have you all reaching for your nitro in your sock. These are going to be big numbers, and no matter what the numbers are, there's a project for you there. Okay, so let's just say somebody said, well, what do we get for half? There's a project for half. I don't think I can get all the square footage, and we might have to sacrifice on some things, but this identifies a path that optimizes the program need. It's not unusual to say, well, we can't afford that, what can we buy for something less? And if that's the case, then we'll work to try to help you figure out what that less would consist of. So you see the array of sites. Option C is the remodeled project. New PD is standing out at the Cottonwood site, or what I'm terming the Cottonwood site, and then the fire department addition and remodeling is also identified. And I don't expect, you're gonna have to look at these budgets and digest them, and then we'll come back, and if need be, we'll sort of walk through it with you at a time when you've had an opportunity to consider it more.
Did you get a chance to look, is there a reason we aren't utilizing maybe Hartbrook Park and building there? Because there they have access to this highway both ways instead of moving us south, which is further away from where we're expanding to the north and northeast.
We didn't, but if you can give me a site definition, the ability to take these things and plop them on sites is pretty unlimited. So if there's another site, we'd be happy to take a look at it. We did not do any geotechnical. One of the things that, the caveats that I have on Cottonwood is it's a highly organic site, and I mean that in the best terms. It's probably full of good, rich topsoil, and good, rich topsoil is hard to build on. So we've taken some accommodations in that construction budget to deal with what we think will probably be a high level of organics. You happen to be in a beautiful community that has river access and other things. Those things tend to drive construction costs a little higher because they tend to be areas where there are a lot of organics, and organics are bad in the construction industry. They're unpredictable and don't carry a lot of load. So if there's another site out there, we'd be happy to identify what that site is. We just didn't look at that one as it wasn't on our list, but we'd be happy to look at an array. And my guess is you'd come out of this meeting today and you're gonna start talking about one another. There might be 10 sites that get generated in your consideration of this project. We can get you pretty well oriented as to which are the better sites pretty
Well,
quickly.
it's only 6.14 acres,
Well, that's good.
but here it is if you want to look at it.
Sure, I'll take that.
And I know one of the discussions, and I'm not opposed to any of that if we do a new building, one of the advantages to the Cottonwood site was that you'd have emergency services on both sides of the tracks. That was the appeal, because we do have times where an ambulance can't get over the tracks to a call, and they have mutual aid, where now you'd have police on that side that might be able to get there, or vice versa.
Yeah, I didn't mention railroad tracks, you're aware of them. And when the train's going through, you can't go through the train. So, you know, timing is great. Sometimes nothing's ever gonna happen, sometimes timing won't be so great. And we deal with seconds and minutes and things like that that are pretty important in the survival of an individual in the community. Those become real issues. Absent a bridge that would transverse the tracks, which probably would make this number look pretty favorable in comparison, there's really not a lot of solutions to that other than co-locating on either side. But the tracks aren't gonna go away, and this doesn't solve the track problem by any means.
John, just for confirmation, when it says new PD, that's new PD and Village Hall, correct, in that amount?
Correct. I just called it Cottonwood New PD because just looking for another name or moniker, so I'm confused. So if you go to the next one, I think everybody's familiar. I mean, for a long time, we struggled with inflation in the construction industry because it didn't follow traditional patterns that most people were accustomed to. I doubt that there's anybody in this community, or any community for that matter, isn't aware of the nature of inflation. It's important to note that the construction inflation in the last few years has been substantially profound, meaning it has not followed traditional statistical modeling. You can see that in this chart for years and years and years. It was probably like a 3% inflation. Well, it's gone up substantially and measurably, and it's not like eggs. It's not coming down. And that, I think, is several factors. One is construction entities became very familiar with real-time delivery, and so they could time construction consistent with when they expected product to be available to optimize their labor. That's not always promised or fulfilled anymore, so they're not as efficient as they used to be, and we're absent individuals in the trades. And that starts to be a repercussion within substantial union jobs like carpentry, masonry, electrical, and things like that. So I wish it looked better. If I knew exactly what it would do, I wouldn't be here. I'd be making a lot of money somewhere else. But it doesn't look like it's coming down. I think in 2020, if you'd asked, everybody said, it's gonna come back. It's not come back. And so we've seen 8 to 15% inflation, where maybe we only saw, a substantial marker in something, but it actually did come back. This has been a real issue to overcome. So pros and cons, this is not a comprehensive list, but I like to think of this building as finding the old car in the barn and restoring it. You can use this building. Now, admittedly, there's not a lot in here I want to use. I'd probably have to get in some areas and strip it down to stud. Because if I don't have a good electrical system, if I don't have good piping, if I don't have an array of things and I need a new roof and I want to replace the windows, there's really not much left. But you don't have a building that's falling down either. You don't have a building that has cracking all over and you go, my God, it's going to fall in the river. So I would like to reuse the structure, but that's really all I got. And it's really not a, this isn't a Jaguar or something. It's a commodity building. So at the end of it, you're gonna have a commodity, well redone building, but it's not a high-end building. Now, it may have high value for you as an iconic building in your community for a number of different reasons, but it's an ordinary building. So do you wanna put that much money into a building that's just kind of maybe not achieving what you want to achieve? You still are tied into 2 locations instead of 3, and that may be, in my view, that's probably a good thing. I don't know that I want you in 3 facilities, to be honest. You're not that big a community. I said fire doesn't really occupy a building and multi-stories that well, but you're not that big a community to, I think, mandate 3 sites. You could work in 3 sites, but it probably wouldn't be as efficient as you're accustomed to now. And then everybody's familiar with this project site and what it means to the community. It's tied into the library, so there's this idea about buildings relating to one another. We haven't talked about the library, but it's a real community-based organization that coexists with you on this site, and I think that's advantageous. Cottonwood, there's nothing like the new car smell, and you can't replicate it, right? It's gonna be something that's brand new, and it's gonna be optimized. Even the things that we do that remodel, there's gonna be compromises that are present in that solution because we have limitations here. There are very few limitations in comparison to the other site. So there's advantages to that. You'd get a contemporary solution, you'd have lots of elbow room. That diagram that we showed has the ability to expand. You'd be unrestrained as the community were to grow or evolve in the future. Fire, where you go on fire matters more than anybody else. I think the Chief Misko would tell you that when guys are out driving around, that's like a mini station that's present wherever they are in the community. Well, fire responds from a set point, and they do so to maintain response times that are agreeable to the community and fulfill their expectations for what the fire service is to provide to them. So your response from here is going to be the same. And if somebody was to say, I can't tolerate moving because now I moved over here and my response time's longer, this is the status quo. And sometimes politically that's more advantageous, is to just keep it as what everybody is accustomed to rather than changing that. I think that's probably an advantage in terms of how you make your decisions. Did I take and change what people's expectations are? Not at all. The response time to the far south side or the north side is going to be the same to the east or the west. If you move somewhere else, then all of that's changed. And I think that adds a layer of complexity to the decision making. In terms of cons, like I said, PD would be better on 1 floor. I can't achieve that here. I could achieve it if I kicked Village Hall out or something, right? But I can't really do that. So a multi-story addition, while it achieves the goal, is probably not the best, bless you, the best designed solution. So if I had an alternative solution, I'd encourage you to go down that solution. But ultimately, money factors in too. You're still in an old building no matter what I do. Even if the systems are all updated, I got 90-year-old bones and got a great new heart. Everything's working great, but I'm still in an older building. Admittedly, it's now updated, so you have more life attached to it, but you're still in an older building. You still have a parking issue, right? So I'm competing for parking. Whether it's a bad day or a good day, whether it's like this or whether it's overflowing at the seams, my parking solution isn't really fixing much, except I'm providing more PD parking. But I'm doing it by enclosing PD parking that's already there. So I haven't really changed the parking dynamic. It'd be nice to do that, but I haven't done that. Expansion is a moot point, I think, when we're done here. You'd be hard pressed to find a solution to expand 25 years from now. And it's a messy remodeling. If you think about what we got to have with a contractor on site, working in this present facility while you're having board meetings, while the chief has to deal with prosecution of individuals, even in the fire department where I've got to respond, I've got a contractor on site and it'll be problematic to have them there. It shouldn't discourage you. That's done all the time. It's just not as fun as going into the new house and saying, see you later, right? I don't know if I hit a half an hour, but if anybody has any questions, I hope to give you an answer as best I can. I know it's a lot to digest. I don't think anybody's expecting a decision to be made today because of the profound nature of what we're describing, but consider this our chance to start having a discussion about things like additional sites that weren't considered, or, you know, maybe we do have to work back to a price point. Then we'll work to do that.
John, did you want to touch on the cons for the Cottonwood and the fire side?
Oh, thank you.
If we stopped right at the
Well, there are no cons, and I'm just kidding. Well, fire's the same problem, right? So if you can imagine, now I've got a similar problem at fire that I have here. So I've built out to the perimeter of the site that you currently occupy. If you want to do something else in the future, that would be problematic. If you wanted to add additional apparatus that was large, let's say you need to get another tiller in or an engine or whatever that ends up being, it'll be problematic to do that in the future. I haven't fixed a railroad issue. If a railroad issue exists, I haven't changed it, but I haven't fixed it. If I moved it somewhere else, I've changed it, but I may not have fixed that either, though. So in some ways, it's a con and a pro. Parking, I've got to sort of fall on a sword and ask for permission to deal with parking in ways that are unconventional, or maybe cause you issues in terms of how you administer Lawn Street for everyone else in the village. And usually don't like to make special exceptions for oneself because that implies you're willing to do that at other times. So parking is a real issue there. And one of the things that's expensive there is because I've got so much gable roof, I've got a lot of tie-ins I've got to make, and it makes the roof additions more complicated than they would otherwise be. In some ways, that's the way it is here, but your gable runs in a pretty good direction for where we would do the addition, so it doesn't become as cumbersome. But at that site where I've got that big gable and I'm putting an addition over there, the roof framing becomes an issue. We feel we've got it accommodated, and I have a design solution that'll work, but it's not as easy as one would like it to be, I think. I think it's a fair assessment.
One thing I want to ask is if you could touch on I do hear you keep on saying the one story, all the same floor, because otherwise it's major problems, and I'm just trying to get myself there to see if there was multiple floors, where let's say there was some offices upstairs and then the majority of what went on was on another floor. Why does that create such what appears to be, or I'm getting that it's a major issue?
It's, first of all, you can do anything. You can do a multi-story PD. For the size of agency you have, I think it's not optimal. I'll just use as an example. In many instances, we put garage space at a level and build on top of it. Well, that means that to build on top of garage space, I've increased the cost of my garage. And I potentially made a garage that's not as good as it would otherwise be. That slender blue shape that was on the far west side of the Cottonwood site, I can clear span that, and I can make a garage that's devoid of columns. In addition, that garage has a higher floor to floor than the balance of the building. So I'd always try to avoid building on top of garage, because I think it increases your costs unnecessarily and end up with a less optimal garage solution. You can do it, but with the number of people you've got, I'm worried about when you got 5 guys on, 6 guys on, 3 guys are on one floor and 2 guys are on the other. That's not, if you're in Milwaukee, who cares, right? You got 1,000 guys. Here, you've got a fairly small agency, and I'd prefer it to be on one floor. That doesn't mean it cannot be done, however. I want to be sure that if I was starting from scratch and money were no object and land were no object, I'd put you on one floor. You can be on 2. It's going to cost you more to be on 2. And it's really 2 reasons. I got to do an elevator and I've got stairs. But there are scenarios where we can put you on 2 levels. I can put you on 2 levels here.
The only reason I was asking is because, and I understand in a perfect setting, it'd be like, okay, we're not in the land crunch, but we are in the land crunch. Big time.
If this was the site and you said, let's just say for the sake of argument, I lost some land over there because we did some geotechnical work and it ended up that I couldn't park as much. And the solution was, geez, can I go 2 levels and get the parking I need? Yeah, you can do it. there's nothing technically infeasible. Like, this site doesn't have loading characteristics that we understand at this point that would say I can't build 2 levels. You can, just like we're here. Sometimes you have to compromise on something for a site that's ideal. And if this was instead of 4 acres, 2.5, because you wanted to preserve land for who knows what, I said, man, can we do you could do a great 2-story building.
And I didn't know if it was because of, and it could be from comments from people on staff, or because it was just what you have seen doing this type of work where you just think that it was better. That's why I was asking. And the other question that I wanted to ask is, there was a time when we tossed around everybody being, you know, the agencies being under one roof, let's say, maybe with 3 prongs. You have administrative, you have police, you have fire. And if you're looking from a bird's eye view, there's 3 prongs, each one of those departments. But going to your 1-level approach, they're in one place. So the village manager, it's much easier for that village manager to get over to those people. You're also only maintaining 1 site. It's no questions asked. It's always more money to maintain 2 sites.
If you were out here, the ideal solution might actually be a multi-story solution.
And I'm just wondering on it only because for some of those reasons. Obviously, I'm hesitant to move to the south because you now have yourself within 2,000 yards of the edge of the village, and you're going to the border and stopping, if we just look at taking care of our area and stopping, but you have to go, you're 30 seconds one way, but you're 3.5 minutes, or let's say 2.5 minutes the other way. The train tracks will not go away, but we do have a, yes, added time, but it's not like we're in an area where there's no bridges or tunnels under. Situation happens, trains derailed, we got to get to the other side of those tracks. We know at least we can go up to a bridge and get around. It's going to add time.
Sure.
But there is that workaround.
And absent 2 places, I don't think you can do anything.
Right.
And I don't know where the geographic center is. My guess is it's like right on the railroad tracks
Right.
or something like
Another
that, right?
thing that I want to add, and I don't know if this was relayed to you, but we do have our emergency management coordinator. You know, by having those emergency services in the same place, I could see where that would be beneficial to be in the same place because of that. When there is a major emergency, that's how I just wanted to throw those things in.
And the other thing that goes with it is, this doesn't factor in valuation. Let's just say you said, hey, we desire to be on Cottonwood, the Cottonwood site, all in one place. That's the solution we have to have. Well, you could retrieve increment on this site and the other site as well. So it doesn't maintain the status quo in terms of tax base or anything else. You could develop this as a tax-paying entity. You could develop the fire site as a tax-paying entity. As long as you're occupying them, it would never be that, but you know, that there's some value in saying, let's be all in one place, because now I've got tax paying on 2 sites instead of 3 where I got nothing.
And everybody's in one place,
Yes.
which may sound bad based on a catastrophic event, but I think that we'd be focusing on something that's an extremely not very likely to happen. But you are right. If you want to attack our infrastructure, you only have to send 1 missile instead of 2, so to speak.
But it would be severely impactful no matter what.
Right.
Right. There's no absent making you into a skiff or something like that that's fully hardened and below grade. There's
Right.
very little people can do to prevent direct hits of a tornado or something like
Correct.
that. So, and then the cost becomes exceptionally prohibitive. Those are all doable things. What I would tend to say is the economy of scale when you get bigger is advantageous. So if you're doing, just as an example, if I'm doing remodeling, what a contractor would say is, God, try to keep it on one side of the building. If I start doing remodeling and all 4 sides, the cost increases because the contractor's everywhere, and it's nice to have them in a zone. I think we've been respectful of that on option C here. It would be nice to be able to have something that you can just move into, however. Yeah.
What's the change in amount? I'm just seeing a large change in amount of office spaces, or at least rooms. What's the change there? Are we increasing by about 75%?
I don't know what the exact percentage is, but you can clearly identify all of the offices in the program. So I just clustered it in that manner, but you can look and see, like as an example, we added a lieutenant's office. Current space that one of the lieutenants says is 40 square feet. I think it's about,
Detective.
so you're gonna see that some of those spaces are identified as consistent size spaces, and then wherever we have growth, we try to identify that as
Okay.
well. And the premise is, if I'm gonna spend money, if I don't attack growth or the ability to grow or adapt, I'll leave you with a building that you have to do more remodeling to further or sooner in the future than I would otherwise try to do. We're trying to get a building that's gonna satisfy your need for 20 years. And that's not to say that you're not gonna have to do anything with the building, but we shouldn't have to add space for 20 years. That's part of the premise of the program. Again, now, if somebody was to say, boy, you gotta shave some money out of that, then we'd sit down with everybody we talked to and said, how are we gonna get X out of it? It might be that for this chief, foregoing an additional investigator office is the way to do that. Then you just have to go back and instead of going in this direction, you gotta, I said lather, rinse, repeat. Sometimes you gotta come back in and say, 2 offices instead of 3 is how we're gonna get that achieved.
And kind of what he said earlier, the reason that this kind of started is that this building, it's not like it's gonna fall apart, but there are a lot of things. Matt Zimmerman, one of our public work guys, has a sheet that I will share with all of you at a later date of items that are failing within this building or soon will need updating. I know we've been doing some of the electrical. We have electrical that isn't up, I mean, a lot of this building's probably not up to code because you don't need to be. But yeah, there are some major renovations needed here, but
Some of where I'm going with it, and I don't want to drag it on too much because we're almost at the 1 hour mark. But when I hear you say 20 years, I would figure that we're just getting done paying for it. And then we would be adding on more space, and I would be hoping on what I'm looking at based on historically and the fact that we're about to be maxed out on our border unless we go up. Unless we allow buildings to go up to 5, 6, 7 stories. Our population it doesn't increase as fast as one would think. It's 400 to 600 people, not even 250 people a year. And based on that, I'm just hoping that we would get something where we could look at it and say, okay, your footprint, you're good for 30 to 40 years, not just 20, because we're gonna just get done paying for it, and it's gonna cost $80 million or $180 million to add a renovation on then, where we might have to renovate like heating systems and things like that, but I would hope that we would not have to add on more space.
Yeah, some of this yearly forecasting stuff is it's as frustrating as me hearing the 100-year event. It just means there's a 1% probability you could get an event that constitutes that. You can
Right.
get that twice in a year or once every 100 years. It's just probability. When we think in terms of 20 years, there are certain expectations we have in terms of systems that can outlive that. So as an example, we would be advocating for a boiler-based system. That system should last you longer. Now, admittedly, you get into these discussions about aluminum boilers and those don't last as long, and are you getting high efficiency payback on those things? But there's a certain level of expectation that we have infused into this project budget that may or may not be correct for you. And the reason I'm gonna advocate for boilers is that they provide the most economical and most comfortable form of heat I can give you. I would never put you in an electric reheat, and I can put you in a gas-fired reheat, but boiler is still superior for a building like this. So when we think about ways to do things more economically, it could be, hey, one of the ways we could do that is do electric reheat. Well, I know that that's gonna be cheaper, but that's also not gonna live as long. So, right, that's gonna have a 10, 15-year window, and if I put a boiler in with interior air handlers, frankly, that should be about a 50-year system.
Sure, and that's more of the mechanical. I'm talking brick and mortar and space. Because if we had to expand in 20 years, and then let's say we push it 20 more years, that means that we'd have to double the footprint along the same premise of thinking.
Well, and I think we could, if you were interested in that, I think we could go in and find that. Like, we'll use fleet as an example. When you look at that enclosed vehicle sheet, there are 9 vehicles currently that the police department maintains. We sized the garage for 14. So we didn't look at it and go, now you might look at that and say, the chance of getting to 14 is not realistic. Can we do it for 12? Well, that's part of that process, right? Is
I
there
think
something
that'd be
else?
somewhat accurate if we go up at 250 a year.
Every
Time you hit 1,000 or 1,500, you're gonna end up needing another.
Yeah, so we tried to identify those things, and that's available. I didn't highlight it, but I could do that. I could try to identify where we've identified growth and
I just wanted to ask.
non-obsolescence.
Sure.
I can speak directly for the PD. I would think we took, a big part of this project was saying like, what does our growth look like in the next 30, 40, 50 years? And is the facility gonna meet our needs for that time? I would say from the police department's perspective specifically, I think we're good with the only pinch point of being that evidence room, and that always seems to be like the police department's Achilles heel, because state laws continue to change to where we need to retain evidence for what I'll consider ridiculous amounts of time, 50 years to plus, on certain crimes, and then we're just stuck with that evidence, and it could be quite a bit of evidence depending on the case at times. But when John and I specifically looked at this, that was one area we looked at and said, let's make sure we have a good way to add an expansion on that one pinch point area. Everything else, I feel very confident would stand the test of time as far as sizing.
Okay.
Other than that one weird area, just because if the state legislature changed retention periods on me, now I can't get rid of stuff like I once had, and
Right.
that can be difficult. And that doesn't mean we always have to put it in that evidence room. We can have an off-site storage or something for those long retention cases. But there's options there. But that would be like the only area that would come to my mind that could be problematic, sizing wise.
Okay.
I think everything we went through and talked at for the police department specific, we'd be sized for a long time to come.
So the chief specifically challenged me on the evidence.
Right, because it
And
grows
our-
and grows and
correct.
grows and never
And
goes,
it's
gets smaller.
unpredictable. Right, so if we get one large case that requires an infinite amount of storage for a specific period of time, and as I understand it, what the law would say is that that product needs to be maintained so long as that individual is in state custody. So if I have a murder, we had a project we did in Wauwatosa a long time ago, and they had a couple of Harvest Gold appliances, a washer and a dryer, and the subject in that matter murdered his wife. The evidence was on those two appliances. They had to be kept so long as that individual is in custody and has been convicted and is housed at a state correctional facility. So that, there's this, right, there's these two big things in the evidence room, but the chief challenged me on that, and the way we approached growth in evidence is we can add compact storage. So I can get 60% more growth by going to compact. So we took our best prediction on what we thought that would be and said the growth strategy there is compact. So there are ways to get from point A to point B
Sure.
on a lot of these things. And if there needs to be a more creative solution, then we'll work to figure that one out.
Chief Chambers, do you feel the same on your space, 40 to 50 years?
Oh, absolutely. Again, if you looked at the layout, the big thing is space for the firefighters. So I think, if I remember correctly, we were talking like 8 or 10 bunk rooms, John?
Yeah, all along that south wall.
So
So that's
that
all
would,
individual
I
firefighters.
mean, if we decided at some point to go, full-time, that's 8 people on a shift, So that's kind of what we programmed in. Even just small expansion, I could put more people at the firehouse part-time to cover those shifts now. Right now I can only staff 3 plus my full-timer, so.
Okay.
Real quick, I know earlier it was mentioned, administration has a desire for no more space. That would be this purple area here. I would agree with that statement. Things that you guys would definitely want to think about would be elections. Right now, it's currently held in the community center. You gotta remember, we have 5,000 to 6,000 people that come, not necessarily all come and vote, but several thousand that do come. So we'd wanna make sure, and the recreation center, what we have, obviously she has a desire to grow the program. So if we did a new building, that would be an opportunity. It's not that she needs a 300,000 square foot recreation center, but that we would make sure, she's talked about cooking classes or different things like that, that the board would wanna think about just everything. I mean, for administration, we have what we need. Building inspector, all of our offices. You know, when we have tax bills, we probably have tax bills, utility bills, so 5-6 times a year we have several thousand people come to the counter at certain portions. Building inspector gets a lot of traffic, but again, you guys will have to think, you know, if this is something we move forward with, what you look for a rec center, do we make it a little bigger? I want to make sure that we have it so that we can have an election here. I mean, like he said, this is just, you kind of threw up on paper and said, here's kind of what it would look like.
There's a natural curiosity attached to
Yeah.
what would this, because everyone's accustomed to being here and they know exactly what that means. And then there is a natural curiosity, if I went somewhere else, what would it be? And so this tried to identify what that could be. And again, it's not a final design. There would be a whole array of time necessary to validate the assumptions made, whether this is the configuration you prefer if we were to move this room somewhere else. That's all to be discussed and understood. And it might be Village Hall is on a second level. I don't know. We'll figure that one out.
So what do a lot of places go from here? What is the next step?
Okay, if money were no object and the track took a train and dumped all the money on Cottonwood and were no object, it takes about a year to plan it. And it takes a year to 2 years to build it. If you're out on Cottonwood and the contractor can do anything they want, it's gonna get done a lot quicker than here, where there's no laydown area. And there's an array of factors that restrict that individual's ability to get product installed, and done in time. But think about it in terms of, it usually takes about a year to plan it. Usually takes, in this case, probably 2 years if we're doing work here to build it. And you could do the fire and this project simultaneous. You might choose to do them non-simultaneous. If it goes into a CIP like most of these things do, and it's 5 years out, then you just have to start thinking about those windows in terms of that planning. So if it's 2028, you'd be thinking 2030, 2031, 2032, that kind of time frame to be done.
Thank you.
We might all be retired.
Anybody have any other questions?
No, just, you know, going back to what you were saying, Ryan, you feel that for the growth of your department, this is more than enough space right now?
Yeah, again, I don't, even population, you know, it's the same, you're not talking doubling or tripling bills or tax bills. Again, when we get down to the nitty gritty, we'd want to make sure the storage facilities, the AV room, I mean, like you said, this is just kind of thrown up on paper, you know. Again, in this, yes, I do think it would be plenty.
And even this indicates we might be entering the site somewhere on Cottonwood. We actually saw, one of the guys in my office said, well, what if we came in off the intersection? He just came in along the south edge and, well, you look at that. I mean, maybe that's a really good way to get in and out of the site. I don't know. But that's design. And I don't know that that affects either the cost, the time to deliver it, but it's part of what you would do as designers of a building. You'd get that input. You'd find iterations that are better or worse. Again, discard the things that are no good, reinforce the things that are good. That's the design process.
And real quick, to Ann's point, if this would be desired to go on like Pembroke or any of the parks, what park did you?
I said Hartbrook.
Hartbrook. I mean, essentially it would be the same footprint or same type of thing. It wouldn't change costs, so, but it's something we can definitely do.
And when it comes to budget as well, one thing I want to point out is another aspect that got us here today, or kind of revived these discussions, is Rupert and Milky's actually putting together our impact fee study. And that's something that those fees can go towards the additional amount of space as from where we currently sit. So any square footage the police and or fire would grow, that growth space can be offset by whatever impact fees. And I'm not saying we would have enough to cover those full costs either anyway, but some of that can get offset through those costs. And this study from Zimmerman will be shared with Rupert and Milky to complete that impact fee study.
So impact fees are new builds. Each unit has a certain impact fee. Currently, those impact fees go to pay the library addition, the DPW salt, I don't remember if it's the salt shed. I forget what it was for DPW. The police garage addition, the Survive Alive house at the fire department, and then parks are open to do with it what they want, so they've built shelters, that type of thing. So most homes probably pay in the $4,000 to $8,000 range for impact fees. So again, we, assuming we have 500 houses left with, 270 in the quarry, and then we have what's left up by Sandhill and that. You'll just have to figure that value, but Rupert and Milky can run those numbers, but that's where we get that money from.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, if you have
Thank
any
you very much.
questions, we'll help you get from point C to D. This is A to B. There's more steps here. We'll help you come up with options if we need more options.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So now we have consideration of village board minutes of the July 10th, 2023 meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the village board minutes of July 10th, 2023.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the July 10th meeting. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Abstain.
That motion is carried. Now we have items related to vouchers for payments. We have consideration of vouchers for payments in the amount of $165,044.97.
I'll make a motion to approve the vouchers in the amount of $165,044.97.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the vouchers for $165,044.97. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? That motion is carried. Now we have operators, bartenders licenses. This is for Madison Reeves.
I'll make a motion to approve Madison Reeves.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve that bartender's license for Madison Reeves. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion is carried. Do you still want me to push this?
No, he's here.
Okay. Now we have item 5, which is consideration of a third reading and adoption of a bill for an ordinance number 06-26-2023, an ordinance creating 46-090, 46 and 46-910 and 46-911 of the Village of Hartland Code of Ordinances regulating hotels and motels, and amending 46-1 and 46-466 and 46-469 and 46-491 and 46-494 and 46-516 and 46-519 and 66-14 of the Village of Hartland Ordinance.
So, as you recall, this is the third reading. What this would do is create an ordinance in our books for hotels and motels. In accordance with this ordinance, essentially, a lot of it would go through a conditional use process through development. I had asked Village Attorney De La Mora to get here. He got out of his other meeting and came right over. So if anybody has any questions on the hotel motel before it gets approved or denied, please ask now.
If no one does have questions, a motion can be made. It does not have to be made, but it would take a motion to pass this.
I'll make a motion to adopt the bill of, do I have to read all these numbers?
Nope.
Yes?
You don't have to. I'll
Okay.
read them. Once you make the motion, I'll read them all.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve and adopt a bill for an ordinance number 06-26-203, an ordinance creating 46-090 and 46-910 and 46-911 of the Village of Heartland Code of Ordinances regulating hotels and motels, and amending 46-1, 46-466, and 46-469, and 46-491, and 46-494, and 46-516, and 46-519, and 64-14 of the Village of Hartland Ordinance.
I believe there was one skipped, 46-492.
Hold on, I had two people talking at one time. What was that?
There was one skipped, I believe by accident, 46-492 in the reading.
Yeah, so when I'm looking at what is amended, it didn't match, so I would agree to add 46-492 in this. It just didn't make the original document here.
Would the person that made the motion want to include 46-492?
Yes, please.
Also second for that.
Okay. Let's take a vote quick. Accepting 46-492 as it was not originally on the packet, but it is on the ordinance. So this would be basically an amendment to add that to the motion. So this is to add 46-492. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. So to say them quickly, all the numbers that I read the first time, and then after the motion was made, I read all the numbers. This is also adding 46-492 to all those numbers.
Correct.
I will I will ask our village attorney if that would meet legal precedent that we are making a legal motion here with the legal amendment.
It is in correct form.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? That motion is carried. Item 6, we already took up as we had suspended the rules. So we will move to item 7, which is consideration of renewal of tower lease with Verizon Wireless.
So to give a little background on this, our tower lease contracts usually last, they're 5-year contracts. That's our flower. They're fixing. They redo our flowers. No. So these contracts are usually 5-year contracts with extenders. So this contract, it was, I think it went 25 or 30 years. It did end. So we renegotiated with them to continue that. And this will be an increase of about $5,665 a year for the village. These tower leases can range anywhere from $25,000 to $40,000 a year. So they're very key and beneficial to us. So this is a positive to renegotiate and continue for at least 5 years, if not 10, and then renegotiate at that point.
Can I ask you how many others do we have?
I want to say 7 or 8. Hold on one second. We have none on Bristlecone Tower as of yet. We are trying to wait until we renegotiate any of these before we would discuss that. Hold on one second. It's going to pull up right here. This will kind of show you some of them. Looks like we currently have 6. With that one negotiated, next year will be 141,000. We'll negotiate some of the highlights. That's kind of what I'm showing. We'll be doing a T-Mobile one shortly. Dish Network has reached out to us. They're trying to get on a tower for another 30 or 40,000. So it is a very positive revenue adder for the village.
I'd make a motion that,
Well, I was just gonna say, who determines these rates? They do, or do we have room to negotiate?
Yeah, the village attorney negotiated them, and as part of that, he negotiated a $6,000 payment for his time to them. So, yeah, it's a back and forth, and yeah.
They just seem pretty cheap.
So like most farmers get like 500 to 1,000 a year, maybe 1,500 municipalities. That's why we like it. So they're very good.
I make a motion we renew the lease with Verizon for the tower antenna.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the renewal of the tower lease with Verizon Wireless. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion is carried. Now we have announcements. Mr. Youngblood, we'll start with you, and we'll just go right around the horn.
Tom Jensen is handling
Use your
announcements
mic.
All right, Tom? After deferral from Mr. Youngblood, you have the
Yes,
floor.
yeah.
I talked earlier.
The DPW last week had the pre-construction meeting with Zenith Tech for Hartland West pedestrian bridge. This has been a hot topic. And I can report that the demolition of the old bridge will begin next Monday, the 31st. And the planned projected date for the setting of the bridge is the 16th of August. So that's getting work done. DPW has recently installed a new gas pump monitoring system as well this last week. The system services police, fire, and DPW. And this system will allow for strategic monitoring and budgeting for the village in the upcoming years. And then along with that, this week, Wednesday is Kids Day, so DPW along with police and fire are working together to make sure that event goes off without a hitch. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chief?
New ambulance is in service, and it's going first out right now. Most of the people that are normally driving it have driven it and gotten used to it, so it's been responding to calls. We have state inspection for both ambulances on the 10th of August, so they come in semi-annually now, and then just inspect it, make sure everything that's supposed to be on it is on it. So we've gone through the list and made sure everything is there and in place. So that should go without a hitch. Julie is very good at record keeping. She has binders for both ambulances. All they have to do is open them up and look at what they normally do, and they'll see receipts for repairs, everything like that. So that's all set. Other than that, we had hose testing last week, so all the hose got tested. I did not hear any that did not pass, so we should be good that way. So everything's been repacked and dried and ready to roll again.
Awesome.
Only quick update I had is the National Night Out is next week, Thursday, August 3rd, from 6 to 8 in Nixon Park.
Thank you, Chief.
So that was my item. Next Thursday is National Night Out from 6 to 8 p.m. We will have the police department there with vehicles, the fire department, public works. We will have 15 vendors. We'll have an inflatable obstacle course for children, a rock climbing wall for children. Flight for Life will be there at 7:15 p.m. And hopefully a lot of the department heads will be there, and hopefully as many board members as possible. Should be a good time.
Mr. Hallquist,
I have nothing to add.
anything for Park Board?
No. Well, there's some things that shouldn't be advertised yet. So-
Okay. Mr. Connor?
I guess Saturday with the street dance, I just want to thank DPW, fire and police again, did a great job of organizing it, keeping everybody safe. So it was a nice event, and as usual, everybody did a great job
And Chamber of Commerce for putting it on.
as well. Yes.
The street dance was great. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for putting that on. I think it's awesome that it's back in the street. And I do think that everybody did a fantastic job making that happen. It's my understanding that there was not any major incident, and which is always a good thing. That means people got out, had a great time, and did so safely. One of the things is was just alluded to with National Night Out. I don't know how much of an announcement this is, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think we really need to start looking, not only staff, but also the elected officials up here and the people on the other boards and committees, especially like Park, giving what can we do to entice companies or organizations to come in here to create things for kids. I do know it's been brought up time and time again, but in the last, there's a lot that there did used to be for children that no longer does exist. There did used to be a skating rink in Hartland. There did used to be, and I know we still have basketball courts, but there was basketball courts down at Nixon. I know some people don't like that, some people do, but there's a lot of different things that have kind of gone away. There's even other things for the youth that are not on the top of my head right now. But, the bowling alley is gone. There's a lot of things for youth. We have created the splash pad. We do have amazing things going on in the parks, but even on Thursday nights, I do see the children playing, but a lot of that has turned into, a lot of the adults come and bring their folding chairs and sit down, and we'll have a beer or we'll have a glass of wine and sit and enjoy, and I think that that's fantastic but what can we do that we actually entice? We don't have economic development committee. What can we do to entice companies that maybe we do get, you see some of these companies out there. I hate to just say a name because it doesn't matter what it is, but we've seen it before. Some of our smaller businesses are doing a lot for kids. We do have an arcade now. There's a lot of things Hartland does have, but what can we do to entice for more? Whether it be a indoor trampoline park. I don't want to say specific companies, but are there things we can do that we could do to entice some of those companies to come here so there's more for the youth, which I think does lead to idle hands can lead to kids being not too bright, and it does the same for adults. But things for people to do not only brings people to Hartland and showcases our village, but I think leads to children having good, productive things to do. So I just wanted to say that I think that that's something that we do need to start to make a push on to even see if there is a way to entice something in here. But I think that the village is doing a fantastic job. I think you see it in the summer, the amount of things going on and where this village is going. I think that this board, the people that are on staff, and this village as a whole is making it happen. So far so good on the summer. That's all I got. Nothing?
It was a great weekend at the street dance. Thanks again for the police department, fire department. Everything was blocked off safely. Done really well. Thank you.
With that being the end of announcements, we now have number 9, which is consideration of a motion to recess into closed session pursuant to State Statute 19.85, Section 1, subsection C, for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee in which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, namely to consider and discuss the respective recommendation of the village manager and village president of an appointee to the position of village clerk pursuant to the Village of Hartland Ordinance 2-169, Section A, and to reconvene into open session pursuant to 19.85, Section 2, for the purpose of considering any action as may be necessary and appropriate.
I'll make a motion to recess into closed session pursuant to statute 19.85 1C as you stated.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to convene into closed session. To recess into closed session, and we will be reconvening into open session upon the conclusion of the closed session. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll take a little 3-minute break, and then we'll get into closed session. We are live.
Okay.
So we're gonna give it like 5 seconds and then it'll be.
A little squiggly up on our screen.
It's at 8:15, and we are back in open session here in the Village of Hartland in the boardroom at Village Hall. We had discussions in executive closed session regarding the position of the clerk, and I will leave it up to any of the members of the board.
Read number 10.
Sure. The item that we have on the agenda coming out of closed was in anticipation of what may happen, but item 10 on our agenda is consider and take any action deemed appropriate pursuant to the previously held closed session. Pursuant to Village of Hartland Ordinance 2-169, Section B, the village president shall not have a vote on such confirmation. This is in regards to a clerk position, if the board decides to proceed to vote on a confirmation.
So again, if you're voting, if you make a motion, it would be for Sandy Policello to be the next clerk at the village.
Can we get a spelling, please, just for verification?
Yes. Sandy is Sandee. Cello, will you?
We gotta make a vote for, or a motion.
Spelling first, please.
Spelled P-O-L-I-C-E-L-L-O.
Hey, I just want to make sure.
Perfect.
I'd
Just
like-
wanted to verify.
I'd like to make a motion to offer the clerk position to Sandy Policello. Is that correct?
My thing's not working.
Oh, no. Do I want to? No.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to offer the clerk position in the Village of Hartland, based on the recommendation from the village manager to the village president, and having been discussed, to Sandy Policello. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That is a unanimous vote. If anybody would prefer a roll call, we will do one. I think with such a large decision, we'll go through and we'll do it again, if you don't mind. Trustee Hallquist.
Aye.
Trustee Connor.
Aye.
Trustee Walschlager.
Aye.
Trustee Trutchell.
Aye.
Trustee Pfeiffer. Trustee DeBoer. That is unanimous, all ayes or yeses. I do think it'd be approved. With that, no, they're gonna, I'm saying, are we gonna get her in trouble? That passes, it's unanimous, so the only thing we have left to do at this time is end this meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn this meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? This meeting's adjourned.